So since reading this book, which I feel has actually been impactful on us both, we've already mentioned the idea that we have since looked at certain experiences can only be enjoyed at certain parts of life. We've since looked at, well, we're not going to hoard all our cash and save it to the end and before we give any to potentially children or charities or anything like that. What are you actually going to change in your life because of this, Grant? Like, what's this actually made you look at?
Yeah. So we've spoken about two of like the changes that I'm making, which is like the first one is like that question around autopilot.
Actually, hang on. You normally act as the host when we do
like
these episodes. It's somehow I've acted as the host today and I'm asking you things. It's like
this is and then I just get all over the structure you try and give me, just like you do to me. So
I've given you an excellent structure. I want feedback on this episode. Has this been a good episode? Anyway, Grant, what are you changing?
So the first one we spoke about it, which was that concept of like running on autopilot. And I even tested it out. I gave it to a guy that hadn't read the Die with Zero book. And I just said, think about this concept. Like, are you running your life on autopilot? And he's like, Grant, that is one of the most profound questions that I've been asked. And I'm like, huh. So that idea, so for me, it's more like I'll print it off on a label and I'll stick it on my computer or something like that of just going.
So you're going to do it like triggered review process? Just
an awareness piece, like once a day, whether it's on a mirror or whether it's somewhere, maybe on a background or something. For this season, I'm like, I think it's just a good awareness piece just to keep jogging the memory, to talk to Hazel about it, to reevaluate what I'm doing each day. I've done the same with like the David Goggins and James Ramko stuff that I spoke about at the start. And like I printed it off and did these labels and stuff. So there's like one thing that I've applied and changed. The other one was like, and you mentioned it around like the certain times of life. So instead of like one list of things that I want to try and achieve in this lifetime, trying to separate it down into sort of seasons, I will say.
Yeah, the whens.
But there's this one point which, have you ever read a book where you're looking at a situation and you're like, I know that something needs to change here. I just don't know how I'm going to adapt the change, but I'm just thinking through it. And I've got one from this book, which has just been perplexed in the back of my mind constantly. And so Bill talks about this idea of like net fulfillment. So the equation that you're trying to solve is how do you have a positive net fulfillment? And there are three buckets as part of that equation. It's like, well, how do you have better health? How do you have better wealth? And how do you have as much time?
Yeah, and just to chime in quickly, opposed to like trying to kick the bucket with the most amount of wealth, which is like a lot of people may be viewing it as. Got you.
Yeah. So instead of just going, screw my health, screw my time, let's just go generate a heap of wealth and optimize for wealth. It's like, how do you optimize for all of them? And coming back from my project management background, you would have heard about the project management triangle, where like you've got time, cost, and quality. And it's like,
what is it? Pick two.
Pick two, yeah. Like your project can only ever have two of these things. Like, and so it's like, if you want really good time, really good quality, it's going to cost you a fortune, right? And so my mind immediately went to that, and I looked back over quite like, especially the start of my business career, and I'm like, I was very much running on that sort of project management structure of going, well, I can only really have two. And the two that I always defaulted to, and I'm sure you can guess what they are, which was...
I don't even have to guess. I'm certain I know which two you're defaulting to. But just for the listeners who haven't worked it out.
Health and wealth, right? Like that's all I gave a shit about. Like my time, like screw sleep, screw like I would just not catch up with people just in order for me to generate more wealth as well as improve my health, right? And so through this book, it's like that net fulfillment piece where I'm now going, how do I try and factor in all three at one time? And I'm thinking about it like I've got 3 beakers that I'm trying to fill, and I got a bucket of water and it's got 100 mils in it, and I'm trying to allocate that 100 mils to each of the beakers. It's like maybe 40 mils into wealth, 40 mils into health, 20 mils into time in this season.
Can I ask a question on this? I'm very, very curious. I want to throw one more layer in because I love the thinking that's going into this concept, but the factor that I struggle to understand how this applies is, doesn't it make sense to get the money thing out of the way early because that compounds and then you don't have to work on the wealth?
And so this is where my mind is trying to work through it, because I'm like, similar to how there are certain points in time for you to have specific experiences. like at university, right? That's the only time you're going to go out at university events and travel to Europe as a backpacker and do all these things, right? That you would do. I'm like, does the concept of where you allocate that 100% or that 100 mil change based on the seasonality that you're in within life, right? So as a uni student, you should allocate more to time so you can do the things.
Maybe, but isn't it like
help.
every dollar you invested 20 is worth like 70 or something like that when you're 65 years old?
Exactly, because then I'll articulate it on the other side. If I was 70 or 80, I'm going to be allocating bugger all to wealth creation because I would have done it all previously, right? Which means I got like, 35 in time, 35 in health, and like 10 in wealth, which is just like a maintenance. And so this is why, for me, I'm just thinking about, well, maybe if I built the list of things I want to do per season, which might be 5-year blocks, I also think about what priority do I need to have in that season to set myself up for the rest. Like maybe now I should focus more on wealth and health to prepare me to have more time later on. But then in the next 5-year block or 3-year block or decade block, I spend more on health and time and then a little bit less on wealth because I've already done the thing. And so that's where my mind was starting to think through of going, well, it's actually a really interesting lens of applying that to the seasonality because it really changes across everything because then what you want to do, how you approach it changes. So
completely. I love this ideation, by the way.
Yeah,
I'm even going to give my opinion because, that's what people come with. I believe in your 20s, it should be a very, very, very focused approach to a little bit of health and wealth. I really do, because I feel that if you get something compounding for you earlier in life, the amount of time it can open up for you in your 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s has a greater net return. Where if you reach 30, and I hope this is not hitting anyone who's listening too hard, you hit 30 and you've got no assets, right? And you've had all these great experiences, but you've got nothing behind you, and you haven't built a business, and you haven't got skills. The barrier for you to then accumulating wealth to be able to enjoy significant amounts of time is working against you so hard. So your analogy of like portions or percentages, I think is really, really critical here. But the skew towards compounding assets earlier in life is undeniably powerful.
Completely, because then you think about it, like in your 30s, you'll probably have a family or start a family in your 30s because that's just how the world has changed from 20s to 30s now. And it's like, well, if you went and did your wealth creation in your 20s, and then you can do the Europe trip, you can do the family thing, you can do all those things in your 30s. And then in your 40s, obviously you got bugger all wealth creation because you've done all the compounding and it's starting to kick in, which means now you got health, you got time. And so those are the things that I'm starting to think through of like, what should they have been in a time that has passed, which I focused quite heavily on business and wealth anyway. So I'm not too worried about it. But then I'm like, what should it be for me now, considering that? But then also like, what could it be and should it be into the future?
Yeah,
like,
for people who want to be parents, the kid stage.
It's time. Like you have to
Totally,
have
the time thing and the experience thing comes into it. You may or may not have necessarily the ability to focus on wealth building or career at that point.
Exactly.
It's a deep topic, Grant. That's a very deep topic.
Yeah. Hence why I'm like, nothing's super changed, but like it's this layer of complexity that I'm just like, there could be this sweet spot of articulating the seasonality with the mixture of how you're doing that net fulfillment calculation. Hey, fellow business owner, if this topic and value-packed short video has resonated with you at all, and you want to dive deeper into creating wealth inside and outside your business, check out the full episode by clicking the link on your screen or in the description right now.